We are here for the first webinar in this series on a very relevant topic, climate crisis and the Glasgow Summit, the 26th session of the Conference of Parties. Before we begin, let us seek the blessings of the Almighty with a silent prayer. I request you all to bow down your head for a minute in prayer. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
I invite Sri S. Joseph, General Secretary of the Alumni Association of Bishopmoor College, for the welcome address. Over to you, sir.
പ്രിയമുള്ളവരെ, ബഹുമാന്യരെ, ഒരു വിദ്യാർത്ഥി സംഘടനയെ സംബന്ധിച്ചിടത്തോളം വളരെ പ്രധാനപ്പെട്ട ഒരു മീറ്റിംഗ് ആണ് ഇന്ന് നടക്കുന്നത്. അതുകൊണ്ട് തന്നെ സംഘടനയുടെ മറ്റു പ്രവർത്തനങ്ങളെ കുറിച്ചോ മറ്റ് വിശദാംശങ്ങളെ കുറിച്ചോ ഉള്ള എല്ലാ അലങ്കാരങ്ങളും ഒഴിവാക്കി നേരെ കർത്തവ്യത്തിലേക്ക് നാം കടക്കുകയാണ്. ആമുഖമായി ഒന്ന് രണ്ട് കാര്യങ്ങൾ മാത്രം പറഞ്ഞുകൊള്ളട്ടെ. സംഘടനയുടെ അക്കാഡമിക് കമ്മിറ്റിയുടെ ഉദ്ഘാടനവും ചിന്താ സരണി എന്ന പേരിൽ നടത്തുന്ന ആദ്യ വെബിനാറുമാണ് ഇന്ന് നടന്നത്. അസോസിയേഷന്റെ മറ്റ് കമ്മിറ്റികളിൽ നിന്ന് വ്യത്യസ്തമായി അക്കാഡമിക് കമ്മിറ്റിയുടെ പ്രവർത്തനങ്ങളിൽ കൂടുതലും നമ്മുടെ വിദ്യാർത്ഥികൾക്ക് ഗുണപ്രദമായ വിഷയങ്ങൾ ഉൾക്കൊള്ളിച്ചുകൊണ്ടാണ് പ്രവർത്തിക്കാൻ ഉദ്ദേശിക്കുന്നത്. അതുകൊണ്ട് തന്നെ നമ്മുടെ കോളേജിലെ അധ്യാപകർ ഉൾപ്പെടെ ധാരാളം വിദ്യാർത്ഥികൾ ഇതിൽ ഇന്ന് പങ്കെടുക്കുന്നു എന്ന സവിശേഷത കൂടി ഇന്നത്തെ മീറ്റിംഗിനുണ്ട്. ക്ലൈമറ്റ് ക്രൈസിസ് എന്ന വിഷയത്തിൽ നമുക്ക് ലഭിക്കാവുന്ന ഏറ്റവും നല്ല റിസോഴ്സ് പേഴ്സണെ തന്നെയാണ് ഇന്ന് നമുക്ക് ലഭിച്ചിരിക്കുന്നത്. ഞാൻ ദീർഘിപ്പിക്കുന്നില്ല, എൻ്റെ കർത്തവ്യത്തിലേക്ക് കടക്കുകയാണ്. ഈ മീറ്റിംഗിൽ അധ്യക്ഷത വഹിക്കുന്ന അലൂമിനി അസോസിയേഷന്റെ പ്രസിഡന്റ് ശ്രീ KG മുകുന്ദൻ, കോളേജിന്റെ പ്രിൻസിപ്പൽ ആരാധ്യനായ ഡോക്ടർ ജേക്കബ് ചാണ്ടി സാറ്, വൈസ് പ്രിൻസിപ്പൽ രഞ്ജിത്ത് സാർ, കോളേജിലെ പ്രിയപ്പെട്ട വിദ്യാർത്ഥി സുഹൃത്തുക്കൾ, ഡിപ്പാർട്ട്മെന്റ് ഹെഡ്സ്, പ്രിയപ്പെട്ട ഞങ്ങളുടെ BC ജോൺ സാറ്, കോശി നയനാൻ സാറ്, സാബു സാർ ഉൾപ്പെടെയുള്ള പ്രിയപ്പെട്ട പൂർവ്വ അധ്യാപകർ, ഇന്നത്തെ പരിപാടിയുടെ നടത്തിപ്പിന്റെ എല്ലാ മുന്നൊരുക്കങ്ങളും വളരെ ഭംഗിയായി നിർവഹിച്ചുകൊണ്ടിരിക്കുന്ന അക്കാഡമിക് കമ്മിറ്റിയുടെ കൺവീനർ കൂടിയായ ഡോക്ടർ ഷെർലി പി ആനന്ദ്, ഡോക്ടർ ലിനറ്റ് ജോസഫ്, അതുപോലെ തന്നെ ഓർഗനൈസിംഗ് സെക്രട്ടറി ശ്രീ KL ഹരിബാബു, അസോസിയേഷന്റെ എക്സിക്യൂട്ടീവ് കമ്മിറ്റി അംഗങ്ങൾ ഉൾപ്പെടെയുള്ള മറ്റ് അംഗങ്ങൾ, ഈ മീറ്റിംഗിൽ പങ്കെടുക്കുന്ന മറ്റ് വ്യക്തിത്വങ്ങൾ ഉൾപ്പെടെ എല്ലാവരെയും ഒറ്റ വാക്കിൽ വളരെ ബഹുമാനത്തോടെ ഈ മീറ്റിംഗിലേക്ക് സ്വാഗതം ചെയ്യും. ഈ പ്രോഗ്രാം ഇന്ന് ഉദ്ഘാടനം ചെയ്യുന്നത് നമ്മുടെ മുൻ അഡീഷണൽ ചീഫ് സെക്രട്ടറിയും ഇപ്പോൾ കേരള റബ്ബർ ലിമിറ്റഡിന്റെ CMDയും അതുപോലെ തന്നെ നമ്മുടെ പൂർവ്വ വിദ്യാർത്ഥിനിയുമായ ശ്രീമതി ഷീല തോമസ് IAS റിട്ടയർഡ് അവർകളാണ്. മാഡത്തെ സംബന്ധിച്ച് പറയുമ്പോൾ നമ്മുടെ അലൂമിനി അസോസിയേഷന്റെ എല്ലാ പ്രവർത്തനങ്ങളിലും വളരെ സജീവമായ ഒരു സാന്നിധ്യമാണ്. ഞങ്ങൾക്ക് വേണ്ട നിർദ്ദേശങ്ങൾ കാലാകാലങ്ങൾ തന്നുകൊണ്ടിരിക്കുന്ന ഒരു വ്യക്തിത്വം കൂടിയാണ്. ശ്രീമതി ഷീല തോമസ് അവറുകളെ വളരെ ആദരവോടുകൂടി ഈ യോഗത്തിലേക്ക് ഹാർദമായി സ്വാഗതം ചെയ്തുകൊള്ളു. Today the entire Bishopmoor College family is privileged to have Srimati Avantika Goswami, a climate policy professional, to deliver a speech on climate crisis. She is the Deputy Program Manager on Climate Change at Center for Science and Environment in New Delhi. And the important thing is she has represented CSE at COP26 in Glasgow. We are grateful to you, madam, for accepting our invitation. And on behalf of the Alumni Association and the entire participants today, I extend a warm welcome to Srimati Avantika Goswami. ഞാൻ അവസാനിപ്പിക്കട്ടെ. ഈ യോഗത്തിൽ പങ്കെടുക്കുന്ന മുഴുവൻ വ്യക്തികളെയും ഒരിക്കൽ കൂടി ഹാർദമായി സ്വാഗതം ചെയ്തുകൊണ്ട് നിർത്തുന്നു. നമസ്കാരം.
Thank you, Joseph, sir. I now invite Sri KG Mugundan, President of the Alumni Association, for the presidential address.
ബഹുമാന്യരെ, പ്രിയപ്പെട്ടവരെ, അക്കാഡമിക് കമ്മിറ്റിയുടെ ചിന്താസരണിക്ക് തുടക്കം കുറിക്കുകയാണ്. പൂർവ്വ വിദ്യാർത്ഥി സംഘടന വ്യത്യസ്ത മേഖലയിലുള്ളവരെ ലക്ഷ്യമാക്കി വിവിധ കമ്മിറ്റികൾ രൂപവൽക്കരിച്ച് വൈവിധ്യമാർന്ന പരിപാടികൾ നടത്തുകയാണ് ഈ വർഷം 2 മാസങ്ങളായിട്ട്. ലിറ്റററി കമ്മിറ്റിയുടെയും കൾച്ചറൽ കമ്മിറ്റിയുടെയും ഡോക്ടേഴ്സ് ഫോറത്തിന്റെയും പ്രോഗ്രാമുകൾ തുടങ്ങിക്കഴിഞ്ഞു. ഇന്നിപ്പോൾ അക്കാഡമിക് കമ്മിറ്റിയുടെ ആദ്യ പരിപാടി നടക്കുന്നു എന്നത് ഏറെ സന്തോഷം പകരുന്ന വസ്തുതയാണ്. ഇന്നത്തെ പ്രോഗ്രാമിൽ പ്രധാനമായുള്ളത് ശ്രീമതി അവാന്തിക ഗോസ്വാമിയുടെ പ്രഭാഷണവും അതിനുശേഷം ചോദ്യോത്തര വേളയുമാണ്. ചിന്താസരണിയുടെ തുടക്കം കുറിക്കുന്ന പരിപാടി എന്ന നിലയിൽ ഇതിന്റെ ഉദ്ഘാടനം ചടങ്ങ് വളരെ കുറഞ്ഞ സമയത്തിനുള്ളിൽ അവസാനിപ്പിച്ചിട്ട് നമ്മുടെ പ്രധാന പരിപാടിയിലേക്ക് കടക്കണമെന്നാണ് നിഷ്കർഷിച്ചിട്ടുള്ളത്. സമയക്ലിപ്തത പാലിക്കേണ്ടത് അധ്യക്ഷന്റെ കൂടി കടമയാണ് എന്ന ബോധ്യമുള്ളത് കൊണ്ട് ദീർഘമായ മറ്റു കാര്യങ്ങളിലേക്കൊന്നും ഞാൻ കടക്കുന്നില്ല. പൂർവ്വ വിദ്യാർത്ഥി സംഘടന ഇതര കോളേജുകളിൽ നിന്നും വ്യത്യസ്തമായി കോളേജിലെ വിദ്യാർത്ഥികൾക്ക്, പൂർവ്വ വിദ്യാർത്ഥികൾക്ക്, അവരുടെ കുടുംബാംഗങ്ങൾക്ക്, അങ്ങനെ വ്യത്യസ്ത മേഖലയിലുള്ള എല്ലാവർക്കും താല്പര്യമുള്ള പരിപാടികൾ പല കമ്മിറ്റികളുടെ ആഭിമുഖ്യത്തിൽ നടത്തുകയാണ്. കോളേജ് വിദ്യാർത്ഥികളെ പ്രധാനമായി ഉദ്ദേശിച്ചുകൊണ്ടാണ് അക്കാഡമിക് കമ്മിറ്റിയുടെ പ്രവർത്തനം നടക്കുന്നത്. ഇന്നത്തെ വിഷയം കാലാവസ്ഥാ പ്രതിസന്ധിയും ഗ്ലാസ്ഗോ ഉച്ചകോടിയും ആണ്. അത് സംബന്ധമായിട്ട് കാലാവസ്ഥാ വ്യതിയാനത്തെ കുറിച്ച് വളരെ നന്നായി സംസാരിക്കുവാനും ചോദ്യങ്ങൾക്ക് ഉത്തരം പറയാനും കഴിയുന്ന ഏറ്റവും പ്രഗത്ഭയായ അവാന്തിക ഗോസ്വാമിയെ തന്നെയാണ് നമ്മുടെ ആദ്യത്തെ പ്രഭാഷണത്തിന് കിട്ടി എന്നുള്ളത് വളരെ സന്തോഷകരമായ വസ്തുതയാണ് എന്ന് സൂചിപ്പിക്കട്ടെ. ഈ പരിപാടിയുടെ തുടർന്ന് ഇതിപ്പോൾ ഇന്ന് കോളേജിലെ സുവോളജി, ബോട്ടണി വിദ്യാർത്ഥികളെ പ്രത്യേകിച്ചും പൊതുവായിട്ടുള്ള എല്ലാ വിദ്യാർത്ഥികളെയും ഉൾക്കൊള്ളിച്ചുകൊണ്ടാണ് ഈ പരിപാടികൾ ആവിഷ്കരിച്ചിരിക്കുന്നത്. തുടർന്നുള്ള മാസങ്ങളിൽ മറ്റു വിഷയങ്ങൾക്ക് പ്രാധാന്യം കൊടുത്തുകൊണ്ടുള്ള പ്രഭാഷണങ്ങളും ഇതേപോലുള്ള പ്രവർത്തനങ്ങളുമാണ് മുന്നോട്ട് അക്കാഡമിക് കമ്മിറ്റിയുടെ ഭാഗമായിട്ട് നടത്താൻ ഉദ്ദേശിക്കുന്നത്. ഇത് പ്രയോജനപ്പെടുത്തുവാൻ കഴിയട്ടെ. നമുക്കറിയാം, ഇപ്പോഴത്തെ കാലാവസ്ഥ വളരെ കഠിനമായ ചൂട്, പകൽ കഠിനമായ ചൂടും പുലർച്ചെ അതിശൈത്യവും അനുഭവപ്പെടുന്ന അസാധാരണമായ കാലാവസ്ഥയുള്ള ഒരു നാളുകളിലൂടെയാണ് നമ്മൾ കടന്നു പോകുന്നത്. ആ സമയത്താണ് ഇതിനെക്കുറിച്ച് നമ്മൾ ചർച്ച ചെയ്യുന്നത്. പഠന കാര്യത്തിലും ജീവിത വിഷയത്തിലും ഈ വിഷയങ്ങൾ നമ്മുടെ കുട്ടികൾക്ക്, വിദ്യാർത്ഥികൾക്ക് പ്രയോജനപ്പെടട്ടെ എന്ന ആഗ്രഹത്തോടെ തുടർന്നും ഈ പരിപാടികൾ സംഘടിപ്പിക്കുവാൻ എല്ലാവരുടെയും സഹകരണം പ്രതീക്ഷിച്ചുകൊണ്ട് ഇന്നത്തെ ഉദ്ഘാടകയായ നമ്മുടെ പൂർവ്വ വിദ്യാർത്ഥിനി കൂടിയായ ശ്രീമതി ഷീല തോമസ്, ഇന്ന് ഈ പ്രഭാഷണം നടത്തുന്ന ശ്രീമതി അവാന്തിക ഗോസ്വാമി അടക്കം എല്ലാവരെയും അവരുടെയൊക്കെ പങ്കാളിത്തത്തിന് നമ്മുടെ ഈ പ്രഭാഷണം കേൾക്കുന്നതിനും ചോദ്യോത്തര വേള ക്രിയാത്മകമാക്കുന്നതിനും എത്തിയിരിക്കുന്ന വിദ്യാർത്ഥികളെയും എല്ലാം ഒരിക്കൽ കൂടി സംഘടനയുടെ പേരിൽ അവരോടെല്ലാം ആശംസ നേർന്നുകൊണ്ട് ഇത് പ്രയോജനപ്പെടട്ടെ എന്ന് ആഗ്രഹിച്ചുകൊണ്ട് ഞാൻ എൻ്റെ അധ്യക്ഷ പ്രസംഗം ആ പറഞ്ഞ സമയത്തിനുള്ളിൽ നിർത്തുകയാണ്. എല്ലാവരെയും ഒരിക്കൽ കൂടി സംഘടനയുടെ പ്രവർത്തനങ്ങൾക്ക് പങ്കാളിത്തം ഉറപ്പുവരുത്തുവാൻ എല്ലാവരെയും പങ്കാളിത്തം ഉണ്ടാകണമെന്ന് ഒരിക്കൽ കൂടി അഭ്യർത്ഥിച്ചുകൊണ്ട് ഞാൻ എൻ്റെ വാക്കുകളെ ഉപസംഹരിക്കുന്നു. നന്ദി, നമസ്കാരം, ജയ് ഹിന്ദ്.
Thank you, Mugundan sir. I now request Srimati Sheila Thomas, IAS retired, CMD Kerala Rubber Limited, and the former Additional Chief Secretary, and our alumni to inaugurate the Chinta Sarani.
Thank you,
ma'am. Over to you.
Thank you. ബഹുമാനപ്പെട്ട പ്രിൻസിപ്പൽ, മറ്റ് അധ്യാപകരെ, BMC ആലുമിനിയുടെ പ്രിയപ്പെട്ട അംഗങ്ങളെ, ചിന്താസരണി എന്ന് പറയുന്ന ഒരു കാര്യം ആലോചിച്ച് നടപ്പിലാക്കുക എന്നുള്ളത് തീർച്ചയായിട്ടും ഒരു വലിയ സംഗതി തന്നെയാണ്. നേരത്തെ ഇവിടെ അധ്യക്ഷൻ പറഞ്ഞതുപോലെ സാധാരണ കോളേജുകളിലൊന്നും അങ്ങനെ ആലുമിനി ഒരു ഇടയ്ക്കൊരു ഒത്തുകൂടലോ എന്തെങ്കിലും അല്ലാതെ വളരെ കാര്യഗൗരവമായ കുട്ടികൾക്ക് പ്രയോജനമുണ്ടാകുന്ന രീതിയിൽ അവരുമായിട്ട് സംവദിക്കുന്ന വേദികൾ ഉണ്ടാവാറില്ലെന്ന് തന്നെ വേണമെങ്കിൽ പറയാമെന്ന് തോന്നുന്നു. ഇതിൽ പങ്കെടുക്കുന്ന ആളുകളുടെ എണ്ണം കണ്ടപ്പോൾ തന്നെ ഞാൻ വിചാരിച്ചൊരു ശനിയാഴ്ച വൈകുന്നേരം ഏകദേശം 115 എണ്ണം കൂടിക്കൊണ്ടിരിക്കുന്നതായിട്ട് കാണാമായിരുന്നു. ഇതിൽ വളരെ ആവേശത്തോടു കൂടിയാണ് ആളുകൾ പങ്കെടുക്കുന്നതെന്ന് മനസ്സിലാക്കാൻ കഴിഞ്ഞു. ഇങ്ങനെ ഒരു പരിപാടിയിലേക്ക് എന്നെ ക്ഷണിച്ചതിൽ, ഞാൻ അലുമിനിയുടെ ഒരു അംഗമാണ്, എന്നാലും ഇങ്ങനെ ഒരു പ്രത്യേക ക്ഷണിതാവായിട്ടൂടെ എന്നെ ക്ഷണിച്ചതിൽ ഉള്ള നിങ്ങളോടുള്ള കൃതജ്ഞത കൂടി ഞാൻ ഈ ആദ്യം പറഞ്ഞുകൊള്ളട്ടെ. ഞാൻ ഈ കാലാവസ്ഥാ വ്യതിയാനത്തെ കുറിച്ചൊന്നും സംസാരിക്കാൻ ആളല്ല. നമ്മൾ പത്രത്തിലൊക്കെ വായിച്ച് മനസ്സിലാക്കുന്ന കാര്യങ്ങളേ ഉള്ളൂ. എന്തായാലും അതിനെക്കുറിച്ച് സംസാരിക്കാൻ ഏറ്റവും നല്ലൊരു വ്യക്തിയെ തന്നെ നിങ്ങൾക്ക് തിരഞ്ഞെടുക്കാനും അവര് അത് സമ്മതിച്ചിവിടെ ഇതിൽ പങ്കെടുക്കാനും സാധിച്ചിട്ടുണ്ട്. ആ മീറ്റിംഗിൽ പങ്കെടുത്ത ഒരു വ്യക്തി തന്നെ വന്ന് സംസാരിക്കുക എന്ന് പറയുമ്പോൾ കുട്ടികളെ സംബന്ധിച്ചിടത്തോളം അത് വളരെ ആവേശം പകരുന്ന ഒരു കാര്യം തന്നെയാണ്. ചിന്താസരണിയുടെ ഇനിയുള്ള പ്രവർത്തനങ്ങൾക്കും ഞാൻ ഇപ്പോൾ തന്നെ എല്ലാവിധമായ ആശംസകളും നേരുന്നു. അതോടൊപ്പം തന്നെ BMC-യുടെ ഒരു അലുമിനി അംഗമെന്നുള്ള നിലയിൽ I feel privileged to extend a very hearty welcome to Avantika Goswami to this webinar. Thank you. Thank you for giving me this opportunity.
Thank you very much, ma'am. Thank you for your kind words and your words of encouragement. Thank you. I now invite Dr. Jacob Chandy, Principal, Bishopmore College, for the keynote address. Over to you, sir.
Am I audible?
Yes, sir, you are.
Respected Chief Guest of the day, dear alumni members, and dear students, greetings. I am really sorry because I am little late to join this meeting. I am attending another meeting, another important meeting, and the meeting is going on even now. I'm very happy to see that the alumni of Bishopmore College is organizing so many programs these days. And this is one of the most important program because it is concerned with the environmental issues. So I congratulate the Alumni Association for giving the leadership for organizing such a wonderful program. I understand that this is not the only program, but a series of programs are going to be conducted in this line. And my friend and colleague, Dr. Shirley P. Anand is organizing all these things. So I congratulate Shirley also. So these days, the environmental issues are becoming very important because our very existence in this planet is at stake. So the programs in this area is very important. Every day the temperature is coming up. We are waiting for rainfall. So when the rainfall comes, it is coming in an alarming rate, and all our normal situations are being disrupted these days. So it's of great concern, and we are going to hear from an eminent scientist today. And I understand that students are also watching this program, and they are the ones who are going to get enlightened through these messages, because they are going to live in this world. The future is theirs, but the future these days looks bleak, because how can we go in this type of situation, in this type of changing environment? The sea level is rising, the temperature is rising, so many things, and even the war that is occurring in Ukraine, that is also disrupting the environment. See the destruction that is going on. See the explosives that are there, and people are suffering. That is going to the attack on Chernobyl, attack on atomic stations. All these things are going to affect adversely the environment in which we are living. The effect we are going to experience within a short time. So we think we are safe in India. We are living here. We have nothing to worry about, and we are happy living here. But at the same time, so many people living in the coastal line, living in deserts, living in different regions of the world, suffering because of the unjustifiable decisions taken by the leaders of this world. So in this situation, a seminar like this, catering the needs of the students also, it's very important. So I congratulate the organizers. With these short words, I facilitate the organizers for conducting such a wonderful program. Thank you very much. As I told, I am already in a meeting with our ex-manager, Right Reverend Bishop Thomas K. Woman, in his residence. I am talking to you from his residence right now. So I have to leave now. Kindly excuse me from leaving from this meeting. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for your words expressing concern regarding what is happening around the world. Thank you very much. I now invite Dr. Shirley P. Anand, Vice President of the Alumni Association of Bishopmore College and convener of the Academic Committee, to introduce our guest for the day. Over to you, ma'am.
Thanks, Divya. Good evening, one and all. Respected President of Alumni Association, Sri K.G. Mukundan, our Secretary, Sri S. Joseph, our Chief Guest, Srimati Sheila Thomas IAS ma'am, who inaugurated Chinda Sarani, our seminar series, and our guest of today, actually the Avantika Goswami, who will be presenting the first talk of seminar series. Then executive committee members, respected Principal Dr. Jacob Chandi, Vice Principal Dr. Renjit, VC John Sir, Koshinan Sir, and Dr. Lynette, Rija, Divya, and their executive members, faculty members, and dear students. Actually, you are the target group we are aiming. Your awareness, that is actually that is the matter. We are trying to enlighten you, or your attitude and awareness, that is important for the existence of our our home planet. So I think it is a great privilege for me to introduce, it's a great pleasure for me to introduce Mrs. Avantika, Srimati Avantika. She looks like just our student, I think. She's the Deputy Program Manager of CSE. A word about CSE. CSE, or Center for Science and Environment. That about that organization, you might be aware of CSE. This is one of the, not one of the, it is the premier most non-governmental organization working in India. That is actually, it is not for profit. That is the motto of the organization, not for profit, and research and advocacy organization. It is New Delhi based. Actually, it is founded by Sri Anil Agarwal, a visionary, a great environmentalist of India. He was a product of IIT Kanpur, and now the organization is run by vibrant international figure Sunita Narain, and without any compromise, they are fighting against the issues created by development, that clash between environment and developmental activities. So many examples we can cite. One of it is our Kasargod endosulfan issue, then Delhi particulate matter pollution, and so many things about the adulteration of honey and soft drinks recently. So about the soft drinks of pesticide content of the soft drinks of American company, and so many examples can be cited. So a word about our seminar presented by will be presented by Avantika about her. And prior to reaching CSE, she was a program manager in Earth Institute of New York City. During this period, she could interface climate scientists and industry practitioners to expand that institution, Earth Institute, its sustainability education program. She could also associate with economic analysis and sustainable research for Port Authority of New York, New Jersey, and for the implementation of certain models for energy efficient LED street lighting in Bogota, strategy consulting across sectors such as energy manufacturing, technology, and finance as a consultant. She was graduated from St. Xavier's College in Economics, and after that she got her master's degree in Sustainability Management from Columbia University. And I think she is the most apt person to deliver such a presentation for us. We are lucky to have such an eminent personality. Actually, she attended a Glasgow summit, and our students are getting a golden opportunity to interact with her. Especially, I'm a person, I was in association with the CSE for many years. CSE is trying to produce a network to develop our environmental science teachers are molded by CSE. I attended 4 conclaves organized by Sunita ma'am, and I can understand what is CSE. I know very well what service they are doing for the society and for our country. So one of the eminent personality, eminent figure in the world itself. She's a budding scientist is speaking with us. So my students should give understand its importance, and you can clear your doubts by asking her. Ma'am, I invite you to present your deliver your presentation. Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you very much for the warm welcome. Hope I'm audible to everybody.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you to Bishop Moore College for inviting me. And I just want to clarify very quickly that I'm definitely not a scientist. I'm simply I'm a policy analyst, and I simply try to understand what climate scientists are conveying and try to see how that will translate into impacts on society. But my presentation today will bring in a little bit of climate science, and then I'll go into what are the recent climate policy developments, what was expected from the COP26 summit at Glasgow and what eventually happened, and what kind of path are we on in the future. So these are some of the points I'll touch upon. So I'll share my screen right now. Is that fine, Shirley ma'am?
Yes, ma'am, we can.
I'll just share my presentation.
Okay, ma'am.
Okay, so
Okay.
I will go through the slides, and then at the end, if anybody has any questions, I'm happy to answer them. And if there's anything I cannot answer right now, since I have expertise only in certain areas, but maybe not in others, I would be happy to receive an email from you and take further questions via email as well. So to get started, as all of you here are aware, we are in the middle of multiple crises, and some of them seem more urgent than others. I mean, the transpiring World War III right now obviously has a massive human toll. But there's obviously a much larger crisis that is very slowly but surely advancing. It's the issue of greenhouse gases warming the atmosphere and the planet, and resulting in a process known as global warming. And this is having some really adverse impacts both on human life as well as on our natural ecosystems, plant life, animal life, and so on. So this is the climate crisis, as everybody here is aware. So just to get started, I'll give some of the top line insights from what the leading climate scientists of the world today are telling us. So there is an organization called the IPCC, which is a collective of the world's leading climate scientists. And the organization is governed by the United Nations. The IPCC publishes a major report every 7 years, known as the assessment report. So far, there have been 6 such reports. The most recent one is the 6th assessment report. And the first part of this report was published last year in August. And it collated the recent evidence from scientists around the world on how far the climate crisis really has advanced. And the findings are quite shocking. Many of you would have come across, the report being talked about in media, because now the issue of climate change is being centered and spotlighted by media much more. So I think this is an annotation feature, which is there some way to disable this? I think these lines can be made by the audience members. Okay, so what the latest IPCC report says is that the current concentration of carbon dioxide, which is the most abundant greenhouse gas, it has reached 419 parts per million. Now that is extremely high because the level of carbon dioxide that was deemed safe for human and plant and animal life was 350 parts per million, and we have crossed that safe level. So the graph here shows the trajectory of carbon dioxide emissions from about 1960 onwards, but carbon dioxide has been increasing in the atmosphere from much before that, from the late 1800s, when the Industrial Revolution was just starting off, and human beings started extracting coal and burning it for energy at a much larger scale than ever seen before. The IPCC report also said that 100% of this climate change, 100% of this increase in carbon dioxide emissions is caused by human-driven activities, and majority of this is coming from the burning of fossil fuels and deforestation. What this has done is, there is practically a straight line that can be drawn when you create a graph of carbon dioxide concentration in the atmosphere versus global average temperatures. So there is almost a direct proportionate relationship. So when CO2 in the atmosphere increases, global temperatures will rise. So as a result, today, the Earth has heated up by about 1.09 degrees Celsius on average compared to what the temperature was in pre-industrial times, that is the mid to late 1800s. And just this last decade, which is 2011 to 2020, was hotter than any period in the past 1,25,000 years. So is this unstoppable? Is this irreversible? No, that's not true. It's not too late to bring carbon dioxide back to safe levels, to reverse some of the damage that has occurred. But unless immediate, strong, and rapid reductions are made to global greenhouse gas emissions, which is not just carbon dioxide, it's other gases like methane, nitrous oxide, etc. as well. Unless these rapid and immediate actions are made, further warming will continue. So which means that our opportunity to stop climate change and halt global warming is right now. We have a very narrow window of opportunity. And if we don't do that, if we fail to do that, every additional 0.5 degrees Celsius of warming compared to pre-industrial levels will continue to increase hot weather extremes, extreme precipitation and rainfall, drought conditions, and all other kinds of extreme climate impacts. So in fact, the IPCC has said that rising temperatures will increase the frequency and severity of droughts. Heavy rainfall will become more frequent and more intense as global warming becomes worse. And particularly for India, we are already experiencing extreme heat, extreme rainfall, droughts, and flooding, but these could become the new normal for us unless the world rapidly reduces its greenhouse gas emissions. So some of the activities that cause the release of excess greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. First and foremost, it is the extraction and burning of fossil fuels like coal, oil, and natural gas. Majority of this is used for our energy needs, as well as our transportation needs and to run our industries. Another source of carbon dioxide in particular is deforestation. So when forests are cut down or when land use is changed, for example, when agricultural land is converted into barren land, carbon dioxide is released into the atmosphere. And another major source of greenhouse gas emissions, this is particularly true for methane, which is a very potent greenhouse gas. It is food production. So cultivation of rice leads to the release of methane emissions. The raising of cattle, all types of cattle for both dairy as well as meat purposes, leads to the emission of methane into the atmosphere. So the impacts of climate change are already being felt, not just on human life, but across our entire economy. Economic losses are mounting year by year because climate change tends to make extreme weather events, natural disasters, flooding, droughts, it tends to make these much worse. So as a result, in the past few decades, about 45% of all reported deaths and 74% of all reported economic losses from from natural disasters was attributed to climate change. So quantifying this in monetary values, in 2019 alone, such natural disasters linked to climate change caused over $230 billion US dollars worth in losses. The impacts on human lives are being felt in multiple ways through the expansion, through the spread of newer diseases, through lives lost during natural disasters, and deaths occurred to the tune of almost 475,000 deaths between 2000 and 2019 alone due to such extreme weather events that were made worse by climate change. Wildlife are also wildlife and biodiversity are also impacted. Biodiversity is a major issue that is in focus this year in particular, and climate change is definitely impacting, and it's driving what is known as species extinction. So we are seeing species extinction of both plant and animal life on a scale never seen before as a result of climate change. So that's definitely another major impact. And lastly, the issue of displacement. So extreme weather events are displacing millions of people worldwide, including in India. And this is resulting in a new kind of tragedy known as climate-forced migration or climate-induced migration, where people are forced to abandon their lands or move away from their homes because of climate-related weather disasters. So if we were to look at who are the actors, the stakeholders who can act on addressing the climate crisis, there are a few levels to which this can be broken down. At the multilateral or multi-country level, you have organizations like the United Nations. The United Nations oversees and brings together multiple country governments to collaboratively brainstorm and think about ways to solve the climate crisis and also agree on actions to move forward. The second layer is action that is taken domestically or locally. So, for example, initiatives advanced by the Indian government or by state governments or even city level governments. The third type of action is grassroots action. So you could look at tribal communities looking to protect their forests from being cut down. You have youth climate activists, young people who have been going on school strikes over the past few years to raise awareness about the issue of climate change. So these are examples of grassroots climate action. And of course, lastly, you have the individual level of action that can be taken. What you and I can do, small steps that we can take to, reduce our impact on the planet. But today I'll be focusing mostly on the first one, which is the multilateral form of climate action, which is mainly governed through the United Nations. So if we try to look at a snapshot of what countries are doing to address the climate crisis, the picture is slightly bleak. We have been trying to stop climate change since the 1980s, back when the IPCC was formed by the United Nations. And then the first major climate conference took place in Rio de Janeiro in Brazil. It was called the Rio Earth Summit. And it was followed by the formation of the UNFCCC, or the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. And the UNFCCC is essentially the main UN body that oversees and facilitates climate action between countries. Following the official formation and adoption of the UNFCCC, countries who were party to the UNFCCC or members of the UNFCCC started meeting every year at conferences known as Conference of Parties, or COP meetings. And these started every year from 1995 onwards. And the first meeting took place in 1995 in Germany. The most recent one took place in 2021 in Glasgow in the United Kingdom, which was the 26th meeting of the countries who are party to the UNFCCC. And every year since then, multiple initiatives and efforts have been launched by the UNFCCC to try to get countries to collaboratively reduce their greenhouse gas emissions. So in the next slide, we'll take a look at some of the major milestones that have occurred. So the formation of the UNFCCC was the first example of a collaborative multilateral effort to halt the climate crisis. And the UNFCCC particularly enshrined a very important concept, the concept of common but differentiated responsibility, which we'll talk about further in later slides. So the principle of common but differentiated responsibility essentially refers to the fact that there are only a small handful of countries, a handful of rich developed countries, who are responsible for most of the carbon dioxide emissions that are currently accumulated in the atmosphere, excuse me, starting from the 1800s, the late 1800s or early 1900s. So countries like the European Union, the United States, Australia, Canada, these are the major countries that started industrializing their economies in the 1900s. And started burning coal on a large scale and are responsible for carbon dioxide, which stays in the atmosphere for up to 150 to 200 years. Countries like India have a very minuscule role to play in the stock of greenhouse gases like CO2, which are currently in the atmosphere. So the principle of common but differentiated responsibility says that everybody must act on climate change. Every country must act on it, but every country is not equally responsible for the scale of climate change we are seeing today. So as a result, the countries who have higher responsibility, who have emitted more CO2 since the early 1900s, they should put in more effort because they have achieved prosperity, they have accumulated vast resources. Whereas countries like India, as well as most of the African subcontinent, have contributed very little to this problem. And they are suffering massively the impacts of this problem today. So they will put in effort, but they should put in disproportionately less effort. So it's all on the basis of equity and in accordance with their common but differentiated responsibilities and respective capabilities. That's what this principle says. Following this, the first major treaty or agreement that countries arrived at to collaboratively reduce greenhouse gas emissions took place in 1997. It was known as the Kyoto Protocol. It was an agreement signed at COP3, the third COP meeting in Kyoto, Japan. And this agreement placed legally binding targets on developed countries to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions by a certain target date. And it recognized the principle of CBDR. And as a result, developing countries were not placed under the same pressure as developed countries were. But of course, this was not acceptable to all major developed countries, particularly the United States did not ratify the Kyoto Protocol, and they said that they wanted equal targets to be placed on countries like India and China. China at that time in 1997 was still considered a developing country. So the Kyoto Protocol, while it was a very ambitious agreement, it did not achieve the kind of scale of emission reductions that it could have, that it had the potential to achieve. Over the next decade, so the timeline is visible here, and I'm happy to share this presentation with the organizers if anybody is interested. Over the next decade or so, developed countries continue to push the idea that all countries, regardless of their historical responsibility, should act equally on climate change. So this finally led to another agreement in 2015 in Paris at the 21st COP meeting. And this was known as the Paris Agreement. So the Paris Agreement was the second major greenhouse gas emission reduction agreement that was signed after the Kyoto Protocol. But the difference here was that the Paris Agreement placed equal burden on all countries to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. And it also made it voluntary. So it wasn't legally binding. It said that countries can come up with their own voluntary emission reduction pledges or promises. These are known as NDCs, or nationally determined contributions. And based on the voluntary pledges that each country sets, the hope will be that they will continue to try to reduce their emissions according to the targets that they have set. So we'll talk about the Paris Agreement again at a few slides later, but I'm going to come back for a minute or two to the principle of CBDR. So why is CBDR so important? It's important, like I mentioned earlier, because of the issue of historical responsibility. So if you see here, the pie chart represents the total CO2 emissions that the world has emitted from 1870 to 2019. 1870 was roughly when the Industrial Revolution was starting. And only 7 countries, the US, UK, Russia, European Union, Japan, Australia, and Canada, are responsible for close to 61% of CO2 emissions that have been emitted since then. If you look at India, India is responsible for some 3.1%, 3.2%. China is responsible for 13.4%, but China's rise as a major polluter and major emitter only started post 1990. Before that, China's contribution was also quite minimal. So, and CO2 once emitted stays in the atmosphere for 150 to 200 years. So the current carbon dioxide that is accumulated in the atmosphere and is warming the planet, a lot of it has been emitted by countries who industrialized in the early 1900s. So this is just another view of the same stock of CO2 emissions from 1870 onwards. And if you see, the yellow bars represent the 7 historical polluters that I mentioned earlier. China started ramping up only after 1990. And today, of course, China alone is the largest emitter of CO2, as well as all other greenhouse gas emissions. This green strip here shows India's share to global CO2 emissions. And the blue represents the rest of the world, meaning all the other countries are responsible for a very small share. So as a result, climate change is a global challenge, but the response to it must come with differentiated responsibility, because historical responsibility is different for different countries. If we look at it on a per capita or a per person basis, the inequity is even more stark. So what one person in the United States emits, these numbers are for 2019, this is equal to what 108 people in Ethiopia emit, and it's equal to what 9 people in India emit. So for developed rich countries, their per capita emissions are extremely high, whereas for the poor world, the developing world, our per person emissions are absolutely minuscule. So if you are putting the same targets of emission reductions on us, on countries like us, as you are on rich countries, you are essentially asking the people of the developing world to reduce and shrink their per person carbon footprint even more, even if it's extremely small to already begin with. So this is the principle of CBDR and equity, and it links to the broader issue of climate justice. But climate change negotiations, this is how climate policy discussions have been referred to as negotiations. They have continually seen the principle of CBDR be undermined, and developed countries have continuously asked for equal burden to be placed on the developing world as well. So coming back to the Paris Agreement. So the Paris Agreement is currently the major active worldwide agreement to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. It was adopted in 2015, and it was considered a major success because for the first time since the Kyoto Protocol, almost 200 countries of the world were able to agree on a collaborative approach to addressing climate change. So some of its features of the Paris Agreement are as follows. So the Paris Agreement aims that all of these voluntary global efforts by countries should add up and together should keep global warming to well below 2 degrees Celsius and continue efforts to limit it to 1.5 degrees Celsius. Now, what does this 1.5 and 2 degrees mean? It means that the global average temperature of the planet should not exceed 1.5 or 2 degrees Celsius higher than the pre-industrial temperature of the late 1800s. The Paris Agreement also said that rich countries will provide financing for countries in the developing world to decarbonize their economies and reduce their emissions. So it was supposed to start as a figure of $100 billion in climate finance, and it was supposed to be increased upwards in the following years. A few other interesting features of the Paris Agreement. So I think I won't go into all of the details, but the review mechanism in particular is quite interesting because the NDCs that countries set, the voluntary pledges that they set, they must be revised every 5 years and made even more ambitious. So if a country pledged in 2015 that they will reduce emissions by 15% compared to 1990 by 2030, in 5 years' time, that must be made even more ambitious. So they should try to make it 17% or 20%. So the goal of this is to continue to gradually give countries the space to increase the ambition of their reduction targets, emission reduction targets. So if we were to look at what the NDCs look like, what kind of pledges or promises countries have set. So India announced a 3-part NDC in 2015. India promised that it would reduce the emissions intensity of its economy by 33 to 35% below 2005 levels. It would increase the installed electric power capacity from non-fossil energy by increase it to 40% by 2030. And it would increase the carbon sink, that is the carbon absorption capability of its trees and forests, increase it by 2.5 to 3 gigatons of carbon dioxide by 2030. Similarly, other countries have set similar but slightly different types of goals. China has set a goal to peak its carbon dioxide emissions before 2030, meaning beyond 2030, it will ensure that its carbon dioxide emissions are on a downward trajectory. Countries like the US, EU, and the UK have set absolute emission reduction targets. So for example, the US announced last year that it would reduce its greenhouse gas emissions by 50 to 50% below 2005 levels by 2030. So the hope is that all of these collective efforts will lead to global greenhouse gas emissions reducing. And as a result, the hope is that our global average temperature rise will stay below 1.5 or 2 degrees Celsius. So the latest meeting of countries who are party to the UNFCCC took place in Glasgow in the United Kingdom. And it was the 26th such meeting. And there was obviously a lot of expectations, a lot of pressure on this particular meeting. There was no COP meeting in 2020 because of the COVID crisis. The COP meeting before that was COP19, which took place in Madrid in Spain. It was COP25, which was held in Madrid in Spain in 2019. And COP26 was particularly critical because science is coming out with more and more confident estimates every year that we have a very narrow window of opportunity to halt global warming. And so a number of issues were identified, and these are the issues that CSE identified ahead of COP26 as the issues to watch out for. And here are some of the expectations that we had outlined before COP26. So firstly, we were looking at the issue of enhanced climate ambition. So as I mentioned earlier, the Paris Agreement has a provision where countries will revise their NDCs upwards to make their targets even more stringent every 5 years. So till before COP26, only a handful of countries had announced more ambitious NDCs. And our hope was that the ambition shown particularly by rich developed countries would be sufficient in line with their historical responsibility. The other issue that was in absolute hot focus, it's a term that many of you may have heard by now. It's a concept called net zero emissions. Net zero emissions came into focus in 2018 when the IPCC published not one of its assessment reports, but a special report which said that to limit global temperatures to 1.5 degrees Celsius, the world must achieve net zero emissions by 2050. Net zero means that the amount of carbon dioxide we are emitting is balanced out by an equal volume of carbon dioxide that is absorbed. And this absorption can happen either through planting more trees or through using technologies such as carbon capture and storage. So it's a very controversial concept. Particularly, we at CSE believe that net zero takes away the focus from any meaningful efforts to cut greenhouse gas emissions today or in the short term. But nevertheless, it was in the public eye, and many countries have set net zero goals in addition to their NDCs. So they already had an NDC under the Paris Agreement. In addition, they said, for example, the US said they will achieve net zero emissions by 2050. So our expectation was that at COP26, any country that announces a net zero emissions target will also have a clear plan to achieve it. And it will be a little bit more than hot air and big promises. Another major issue in focus was the issue of coal. So countries in the West have been pressuring the world to move away from coal. And fair enough, coal is a massively polluting fossil fuel, and it's the largest source of greenhouse gas emissions from among the fossil fuels compared to oil and natural gas. So we did expect that there would be that continued pressure, and most of the coal production and consumption today happens actually in Asia. So there was definitely pressure on countries in Asia to reduce their coal use. So we expected some sort of additional discussions on this. We felt that the role of China needed to be spotlighted at COP26 because China is today the world's largest greenhouse gas emitter. It's the largest consumer of coal. And in its NDCs, it does not have a clear GHG reduction goal. It has goals like reducing carbon intensity, peaking carbon emissions, and so on. Another issue was the issue of carbon markets. So carbon markets are essentially a concept where units of value are traded between countries or between private companies, where one entity, which is a higher polluter, will purchase credits from another entity that's a lower polluter, and that will give the higher polluter the space to emit more, but the lower polluter receives the money as a sort of a reward for emitting less. So this is a vast and complex subject that I won't be getting into today, but prior to COP26, it was hoped that the rules for carbon markets, which are outlined under Article 6 of the Paris Agreement, would be finalized and agreed upon. So that was an expectation before COP26. Another issue was the issue of climate finance. So like I had mentioned, the Paris Agreement said that developed countries should transfer $100 billion per year to developing countries to help them reduce their emissions. But this promise had not been fulfilled even before COP26. And the hope was that some concrete commitment would be made on this. The issue of climate adaptation was also expected to be in focus, particularly in terms of financing for climate adaptation efforts in the developing world. Climate adaptation refers to all efforts that countries can take to strengthen their cities, strengthen their economies to withstand climate change impacts. Another issue was the issue of loss and damage. And this sounds very similar to adaptation, but it's a slightly different concept. Many countries, particularly island countries, are facing the brunt of climate change today. Due to sea level rise, due to worsening extreme weather events, many vulnerable populations around the world are victims of climate change today, and they are not, the impacts are not going to hit them 20 years down the line. They are here currently. So the concept of loss and damage essentially says that money should be paid to the victims of climate change today, and this money should come from the developed world because the developed world is responsible for causing this damage. It's a very contentious issue that has been under discussion for more than a decade. And some progress has been made, but so far no financial commitment has been made from developed countries to make any such payments. So our hope was that such financing could finally be agreed upon before COP26. And the last issue that we expected to be focused on was the issue of nature-based solutions. What this means in the simplest terms is the role that nature can play in helping us address the climate crisis. So one example of this is afforestation or deforestation projects. So one of the goals of afforestation or tree planting projects is to absorb CO2 from the atmosphere. And this is really blown up in focus as a climate change solution in the past few years, particularly since the concept of net zero took root and became more popular. But we felt that there was definitely a lot more focus on what nature can do to capture CO2 emissions as opposed to what countries can actually do to reduce their CO2 emissions first. So this is again a vast and complex topic, but we had hoped for some nuanced discussion and outcomes on this before COP26. So what actually happened in Glasgow? There were multiple outcomes, and you know, these COP meetings tend to be very vast, messy affairs where they occur over a space of 2 weeks. But what starts happening in week 1 or on the first day or second day can be very different from what actually transpires on the last day when the final negotiations and deliberations take place. So just to summarize very quickly some of the major outcomes. So we had expected enhanced climate ambition. So at the end of COP26, 152 countries submitted new nationally determined contributions or pledges. They were revised upwards and made more ambitious. And at COP26, it was decided that these NDCs or pledges will be revised again in 2022, and they will be made even more ambitious. So this was definitely a positive outcome. On the issue of net zero, most major economies today, including India, have announced net zero targets. Many of them announced it at COP26. So India, for example, Prime Minister Modi announced that India would achieve net zero emissions by 2070. Which India believes is in accordance with its very low historical responsibility. So developed countries should try to achieve net zero emissions earlier. So 2040, 2050, India thinks that 2070 is a reasonable year, given its very small contribution to climate change. On the issue of coal, a number of countries committed to phase out coal power. And this was a positive development. Of course, there was a lot of pressure on major coal consuming countries like India, China, Australia, South Africa to also phase out coal power. But ultimately, the agreement that was reached, and this is a term you may have seen in media coverage of COP26, where finally the term phase down was used in the final COP26 agreement. Now, this seems like a very small wordsmithing, like a small detail to change. But in these global climate negotiations, or I think at all multilateral UN level negotiations, even one word can make a huge difference on the expectations that will follow. So the fact that countries like India and China requested for a phase down instead of a complete phase out, this really made a lot of headlines. And it didn't really need to. A country like India still has quite a lot of progress to make on its development journey, on its development path. So there's no reason that we should be under pressure to immediately phase out coal power. That pressure should be on the developed world, again, in accordance with the principle of CBDR. On the issue of climate finance, that elusive $100 billion goal that we have discussed, developed countries noted with deep regret that they have failed to meet this goal so far. They also published a report saying that the goal will not be met till 2023. And mind you, this was supposed to be met by 2020, and beyond 2020, a new figure, a higher amount was supposed to be agreed upon, but no new goal was discussed or agreed upon at COP26. On the issue of climate adaptation funding, developed countries said that they would double the funding that they provide for climate change adaptation by 2025, and this would amount to at least $40 billion per year. The issue of loss and damage, which I mentioned on the previous slide, is the kind of reparations that can be paid to climate victims of today. No financial commitment was made by developed countries, and this was a big disappointment for countries like India, as well as many of the small island nations of the world. Instead, it was agreed that another new dialogue would be held at sorry, this is an error. This is supposed to be COP27. A new dialogue will be held at COP27, which is the next COP meeting, which will take place this November, to discuss how finance for loss and damage can be provided. So basically a complete delaying tactic by the developed world. On the issue of nature, which includes forests and other natural ecosystems, 141 countries signed a pledge that they would halt and reduce deforestation by a certain date. So this was one of the major forest-related outcomes. A second pledge was also signed where countries who are heavily involved in the trade of forest-related products, that they would try to reduce unsustainable trade using forest products that leads to a lot of deforestation. So that was among two forest-related pledges. On carbon markets, an agreement was reached on some of the rules that can inform the formation of a new worldwide carbon market. But many questions remain around this, which will then get addressed this year. In June, there is an interim meeting of some of the bodies under the UNFCCC. They will have further discussions on this, and then new decisions will be announced at COP27 in November. And finally, in quite a major development, 111 countries signed a pledge to reduce their methane emissions, which has not really been done before. Methane is the second most abundant greenhouse gas after carbon dioxide, but it is multiple times more potent in terms of the kind of warming that it adds to the atmosphere. So 111 countries agreed to reduce their methane emissions by 30% by 2030, which is a significant development in raising awareness of the fact that methane emissions need to be controlled and reduced. So what did all this lead to? If we go back really quickly to what the goal of the Paris Agreement was, it was to limit the average temperature of the planet to rising to no more than 1.5 C or 2 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels, which is the temperature in the late 1800s. But so far, even after all these new NDCs, new pledges, are we on track to do this? No. The answer is a complete no. As of now, even after the new pledges announced at COP26, the world is still on track to warm by 2.4 degrees Celsius by 2100, even after implementing the NDCs announced at Glasgow. Of course, these NDCs haven't been achieved yet. They will be implemented by the dates that countries have set for themselves. But even if they are fully achieved, we are still on track for 2.4 degrees Celsius, which is far above the targets set by the Paris Agreement. In fact, the world saw a major drop in carbon dioxide emissions in 2020 because of the COVID crisis. But global carbon dioxide emissions are now bouncing back to pre-COVID levels as industrial activity, transportation, aviation, and all economic activity are rebounding to pre-COVID levels. So rather than cutting greenhouse gas emissions, carbon dioxide emissions as much as we should, we are actually going back to higher than we were before COVID. The UNEP, which is the United Nations Environmental Program, has said that a 30% reduction in global emissions is needed if we want to limit global warming to 2 degrees Celsius. And if we want to limit warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius, a 55% reduction is required in global greenhouse gas emissions. And considering that coal, oil, and natural gas, the major fossil fuels, are the major reason that carbon dioxide emissions are continuing to increase year on year, the UNEP also analyzed how countries are planning to address their coal, oil, and gas production. And it finds that almost all the major fossil fuel producing countries are increasing their production till at least 2030 or beyond. And specifically for each fossil fuel, if you see the levels that should be allowed in order to comply with the 1.5 Celsius temperature goal, all current plans of these countries, the major fossil fuel producing countries, will result in 240% more coal, 57% more oil, and 71% more natural gas in 2030 than the levels that should be allowed to limit global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius, meaning that the pledges that countries have made are fairly hollow, because on paper, the actual plans that they are making to invest in fossil fuels, expand their production and use, are all pointing to increased use of fossil fuels in 2030, as opposed to what should be the complete opposite, a complete ramp down of fossil fuels and a ramp up of renewable energy. So that is a summary of the state of climate policy, climate science. And that's also the end of my presentation. I'm happy to take a few questions and have a discussion now. But my email address also is available here if anybody would like to get in touch further offline and continue the discussion. I'd be happy to do that as well.
That very in-depth analysis of the crisis at hand right now. I'm sure our students and community which is listening to you right now has immensely benefited from your presentation. Now, I would like to inform the participants that you can raise your hand and we can unmute you for the questions, or else you can post your questions in the chat box and I can read it out for Avantika ma'am. We can do it anyway, as you please. We have the interaction section right now. And I would also like to inform the participants that a feedback link has been posted in the chat box. Kindly fill it before you leave the meeting after the interaction. So the forum is open for questions, And
No, unless you open the mic, microphone is muted.
Yeah, yes, sir. If they raise their hand, we can
No,
unmute them.
I don't know whether you can see it because my video also is muted.
Madam Colonel Hariprasad.
No, I want to ask you one question. My video is muted. You are hearing me?
Sir, all participants can now unmute themselves. Both video and audio, both they can do.
Okay.
Sir, I think you are muted.
One question, please.
Sir,
can I ask one question?
Yes, sir, please go ahead.
Yes. I'm Dr. Gobinath Pillai, Executive Committee member of Bishop Board Alumni Association. Your presentation has been quite brilliant. You are well focused. You are really articulate. My concern is, don't you think that we have a lopsided concept about development? It's because of that unimaginative and inadequate concept about development that all these catastrophic things have happened. Development is freedom, according to Amartya Sen. That's the title of his 1999 book. Another thing, the so-called climate policy is actually shaped by politicians who seldom think about the next generation. They are often concerned about the next election. Actually, we need statesmen who are concerned about posterity. Another thing, we cannot contest the fact that science and technology have been immensely instrumental in exploiting nature for developmental purpose. Can we expect the same science and technology to reverse it and to undo the damage that has been done?
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir, for some really very interesting questions, which, we also think about a lot, actually. So in terms of the lopsided concept of development, CSE is extremely focused on, the premise that the livelihoods and well-being of our poorest people are absolutely key. And formulating development policy that focuses and upholds that, and also sustainably uses resources, preserves fragile ecosystems, that is the way forward. Unfortunately, that is not the case. You are absolutely right. We are extremely dependent on a very extractive mode of development, which neither benefits the poor fully, nor does it at the same time, it continues to harm our natural ecosystems. Whereas it should be doing neither. It should be uplifting the poor and improving their social mobility, and it should be minimally impacting natural ecosystems. So that reframing is urgently needed, but you actually answered that in your second question, which said that not just climate policy, but all important development policy is formulated with election results in mind, and rather than what will be the best outcomes for the largest number of people and for our natural environment, all policies are aimed towards what is going to harness the maximum popularity in the next election. So this is an ongoing issue. Definitely, there's no simple answer for how this can be addressed. But I think it's valid to acknowledge that when thinking about having policymakers who are concerned about the future, like you said, we are increasingly seeing elected officials who are younger and definitely, between their, let's say, 30s to 50s in a number of countries, who have a more progressive outlook on what the world needs to achieve. You have some incredible youth voices who are getting involved in the climate policy debate. So it's not just Greta Thunberg in Sweden, but it's school children, teenagers, youth climate activists from around the world who are extremely vocal, extremely informed, extremely educated on very complex policy issues, and they are making their presence felt and impact felt on climate policy. I think that is something to be definitely derive a lot of hope from. But yes, as long as with no disrespect to anybody, as long as elderly men are in charge of a lot of climate policy, which takes place, at these international forums, we need a lot more diversity of voices to represent future generations adequately. So, yeah.
Can I ask you another question?
Yeah, please.
Yeah. I'm Colonel Harprasad from Bangalore. My point is this. We have heard quite a lot from Kyoto Agreement, then Paris Agreement, now COP26. Okay. The major setback which you have set in all of this is your carbon credit trading, which should be abolished, because now what happens is the developed countries exploit the developing countries or maybe the underdeveloped countries and take the credit. They go careless about their own developmental process, because they know that they spend some money and buy carbon credits from developing countries or underdeveloped countries. That one has to be addressed. Next in COP27 you may be attending, please ensure that. Second is that we are not having a comprehensive look at what should be done to reduce the carbon or ozone depletion or carbon emission or methane emission. We are not having any idea about it. Like, for example, I can tell you, people said using of petrol and diesel and things like that, fossils, are going to increase the carbon emission, so reduce it. We change over to electrical vehicles, or maybe the move is there to change over to electrical vehicles. But have you ever addressed the issue after 5 years? All these lithium-ion batteries are going to pollute the nation much more than what it has been done in the past. It is not going to be just thrown out. It has to be processed, and it is going to cause much more cancer patients than whatever has been done so far.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
So when you go for the next COP27, please address these issues. We should have a comprehensive, approach to this. It is not that shifting one issue from one place to another place and another point of time. No, it is not going to give a solution for it. Definitely, we are all concerned about the depletion of the ozone layer, the carbon emissions and methane emissions, all that. If in India, for that matter, if Narendra Modi hears that cows and cattle are going to create more methane emissions, will he listen to it? Anyway, just look at it. This is my suggestion, that next meeting when you attend, first of all, you stop this carbon credit trading. Second is comprehensive approach to the environmental issues. Right? Thank you.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, sir. So were there any questions, or were you just making comments? Just wanted to check.
No, why it is not addressed?
Okay.
You people are wasting a lot of our time and energy.
I see. I think firstly on the issue of carbon trading, I am personally not an advocate for, the over optimism in carbon markets that exists from a lot of places. I do not agree. So carbon markets work really well in theory. From a climate economist's point of view, it's a very smooth functioning system. You increase the penalties for pollution, and your polluters will automatically fall in line. They will automatically start investing more in greener technologies that will reduce their emissions. But it's a very gradual process. And if it was something that was put into action, let's say in the late 1980s or early 1990s, and the absolutely watertight rules and frameworks and institutions were established to run something like this, it could have been successful. But carbon markets are what is called an incremental solution. Their impact on reducing greenhouse gas emissions is very small and gradual over time. Today, we've run out of time. We've wasted 30 years in having these discussions. Like you said, a lot of people's time has been wasted since the first climate policy discussion started in the 1990s, late 1980s. And today we've exhausted most of what is called the carbon budget. That is the amount of CO2 we have left to emit to limit temperatures to 1.5 degrees Celsius. So for carbon markets to suddenly take off today and have the kind of impact that we expect them to, it's unrealistic. But nevertheless, optimism in it is continuing completely relentlessly. The hope is that the rules that have been determined at COP26 and which will be further finalized in COP27 will prevent some of the previous issues that carbon markets faced under CDM, which was under the Kyoto Protocol, and so on. So that's the hope, that the systems will become more watertight in the future. In terms of taking a comprehensive look at reducing carbon emissions, yeah, absolutely. Some progress has been made. We've made big strides on reducing the costs of renewable energy technology. We've developed electric vehicle technology in really impressive ways. But there are side effects and fallouts of any new technology, and we have to also definitely figure out how to address those challenges. Solar waste is a massive problem, considering that India has even more ambitious goals now to ramp up its renewable energy. So Narendra Modi, our PM, announced a Panchamrit set of goals at COP26, in which he announced even more aggressive renewable energy targets. So if you are going to make such ambitious targets, you have to address the problem of solar waste, you have to address the problem of renewable energy storage, without which solar energy cannot be ramped up to the scale that we are expecting. So I would really recommend, CSE has just published this past week itself. The Union Environment Minister launched a publication called The State of Renewable Energy 2022. If you have a chance, and I can share a link to that publication with
renewable
the
energy
organizers.
use of that is okay. My point is that where the energy is stored, that fallout of that, like for example, rechargeable batteries, if it is going to be stored in rechargeable batteries, which are environmental, what you call, aggressive, it is going to be demanding on the environment.
India does not currently have a comprehensive solar waste management policy, and CSE has made some recommendations on this. So I would recommend checking out our publication that was published this year, State of Renewable Energy. And there's definitely some of your concerns have been built into that, but I do agree it is an issue that must be addressed in a much more focused way.
Thank you. Thank you very much. No, I just wanted to tell you, because you are the person who is directly involved, so you should protect it. Okay.
Yeah, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Great. Any other comments?
I have a question. I'm Shijo. I'm in a place where I'll be one of the first victims of climate change. I'm in a small city state called Singapore now. So one of the foremost thing. One question which I would like to ask is there a collective in India like the CSC, which is checking on the governments to see if their ambitions, which are being published or being talked about in different COPs or the different international levels, at least are they achievable, or are they taking any steps, at least practical steps, to at least try to achieve a part of it? So is there a collective in India like you, is there a collective force which is checking on those progresses? Because, promises can be made, but as you said, most of it are hollow. But unless, it's as that, climate change doesn't have any boundaries. Like, they can't be, there's no geography involved in this. Anything happening in Antarctica can, cause a problem in Kerala as well. So is there a collective in India currently?
So I think the simple answer to that is no, there currently is not. Under the previous administration, there was the Prime Minister's Council on Climate Change, of which our Director General Sunita Narayan, she was also a member of that. But that council was disbanded. After the recent announcements were made by PM Modi at COP26, I think the MOEFCC announced that some sort of a new committee or a panel or council would be formed to guide the implementation of the new NDC goals, but we haven't heard any further information on that. So unfortunately, at this point, it's just civil society and media, civil society being us and citizens and NGOs and activist groups who will continue to play the watchdog role. And the efforts to continue to push more climate news and climate findings in media is continuing. CSE is playing a big role in that, educating journalists as well. So yeah, outside of those two, I don't believe currently that there is any form of a neutral, independent check on how we plan to achieve our NDC goals. There is not.
Thank you.
Madam, please see your chat box. Some questions have been put there.
Sure. So I think there's one question that I see from Dr. Narayanan Nair. He's saying impact of war and change of priorities of development priorities, delay of target of 2050 and sustainable development goal of 2030. Sir, would you like to clarify your question? Is it related to the war or the sustainable development goals?
Actually, the sustainable development goal is the final end of all these climate changes, because health is the matter. So health is the matter for everybody. And the end product is the earth. Even if the temperature rises to 1.5 or 2, the health is the matter. So in this war itself, which is started, that also has created the prioritization of the developed countries, especially the developed countries in their expenditure. See, just like that, the Germany has doubled its defense budget last week.
Yeah.
So this type of thing is going to happen because of the purchase of war equipments and community, and that will create a dent in the carbon reducing framework of the whole nations. That's what I was telling. And if that is going on, even the present target itself will not be attainable. And they were not that much enthusiastic about this carbon than mere petty issues.
Yeah. No, completely agree, sir. So what we should be doing is we should be mobilizing what is called, mobilizing on a war footing to decarbonize our economies. We should be pushing that public and private investment into decarbonizing our energy systems, transportation systems, creating action plans for our cities. But instead, so much of the funding, particularly in the Western world, like you said, is interestingly being diverted now for war efforts. So absolutely, that is a misprioritization. And we will definitely feel the effects of that. Already the global energy markets, particularly for natural gas, have been extremely volatile and are even more volatile right now. And those effects will be felt in the developed world, in the developing world as well. Fossil fuels at the root of it are not only responsible for greenhouse gas emissions, but they also fuel immense geopolitical conflict as well. So not to say that shifting away to renewable energy completely will take away those conflicts. In the issue of renewable energy, the sources of critical minerals like lithium could fuel geopolitical conflicts of this century in the coming decades. But the kind of volatility and violence associated with fossil fuels is definitely a huge issue. And yeah, I mean, I have no other response other than the fact that countries should redirect all of that defense spending into addressing climate change, which is going to be a problem much, much bigger than, any of the wars are potentially causing. So yeah, in agreement. Anagha Shankar has said, do you think our country will attain a carbon neutral condition in upcoming decades? And what is your opinion? That's difficult to say. Honestly, our focus at CSE is not so much on net zero or carbon neutrality. It doesn't really matter, in our opinion, whether, net zero is a state we achieve or not. What is ultimately we believe is important, we need to focus, look domestically at the maximum benefits that can be available both to our people and to our environment. We need to we need to develop clear sector-wise decarbonization plans, whether it's for the industrial sector, for the power sector, for transportation, for waste. And we need to in an extremely focused manner, implement them sector by sector, because ultimately the emission reductions that we will achieve, it doesn't matter whether they benefit global climate targets or not. We contribute some 3% of global emissions, 3 to 4%. But what matters is the co-benefits that we will achieve. Our natural ecosystems will hopefully start to regenerate. Our air pollution problems will be reduced. Our disaster-struck populations living in low-lying areas, coastal areas, their livelihoods will be protected, their homes will be protected. So we believe that that should be the focus. We need a sector-wise, clear decarbonization plan, and our focus needs to be the co-benefits that offers, and not so much whether we will be carbon neutral or not, because ultimately India has a very small contribution to historical carbon emissions. So that's pretty much the response that I have.
And don't you think that there should be a philosophical shift or an attitudinal shift from anthropomorphism to biocentrism? Because most of the problems are anthropogenic.
Yeah, I mean, climate change is almost 100% caused by human activities. This scientists have established. What that biocentrism can look like, I'm not an expert to comment on. I agree with you in principle.
There should be a philosophical movement that has to keep pace with the policy initiatives taken by the whole world.
Right.
But our policy lacks a human face.
Right.
A philosophical content is not there.
Even if we adopt a biocentric approach, like you are saying, what we need to do is make our approach to working with nature less extractive and more harmonious and mutually beneficial. Our approach to even something like tree planting today is purely cutting down natural forests and planting monoculture plantations in the name of afforestation, drawing down carbon emissions. So that's purely a very extractive approach to dealing with nature and natural resources. So reducing that extractivism and focusing more on a harmonious regenerative approach to food, agriculture, forests, other natural ecosystems, oceans, I think that would be the most beneficial. But what that actually looks like in practice, I'm not an expert to comment on, but I do agree with you.
Thank
you. Yes, please go ahead.
After Glasgow summit, our main frustration is that about adapt funding, it is not decided. There is no clarity about that. Suppose these developed countries decided to release the fund, will it be a solution?
Sorry, ma'am, could you repeat your question? I lost the sound for a second.
Adaptation funding, adapt funding of developed countries, that is not yet decided by Glasgow. Our expectation was it will be decided in Glasgow summit, but that did not happen. But suppose if they are releasing the fund, what would be the criterion for that, and will it be a solution? To what extent it will be?
Particularly on the issue of adaptation funding, there was some progress actually at COP26. Developed countries said that they would double adaptation funding by 2025 to around $40 billion per year, which is still not enough. It still falls short of, I think UNEP had estimated that the developing countries will have adaptation funding requirements to the tune of almost trillions by 2030. So there's a figure available. What developed countries have offered right now is far short of that. But yes, some progress was made actually at COP26. Whether it will actually help or not, so the IPCC just published their adaptation report this past week. And interestingly, they have said that yes, more funding is needed, more political commitment is needed to implement better adaptation plans. But in some places, some regions of the world, adaptation has actually found its limits, particularly for people living in low-lying coastal areas. And even for, they've given the example of smallholder farmers. Beyond a point, you can continue to try to implement drought-resistant crops. You can continue to try to build seawalls and, prevent sea level rise and saltwater inundation. You can do all of that. But beyond a point, the problems cannot be solved simply by adaptation funding or climate change adaptation itself. The impacts of climate change like sea level rise, extreme drought, etc., are continuing to worsen and make some of these places completely inhabitable. So no matter how much you adapt, there's not much benefit being experienced. So yes, perhaps in some places of the world, we are reaching a point where adaptation cannot do much, but in other large parts of the world, adaptation can do a lot to soften the blows of climate change. And for that, adaptation funding continues to be very critical.
Ma'am, can you tell me the optimism level by degrees? Is it that we are going to be optimistic that we will become environmental friendly, carbon emissions will be low, methane emissions will be low?
I think on the issue of optimism, I would rather choose for, hope. So we have to continue hoping and continue pushing for the solutions that we think are the most critical. And then hopefully that will then turn us into optimism once we see the results working. But I like to focus more on hope and continuing to fight the fight.
Thank you. Thank you.
There's one question here. How far is geoengineering happening in India? And are we doing enough studies and awareness? So there's actually the National Geophysical Research Institute, NGRI, which has done some research on the potential for carbon capture storage in India, I believe. Beyond that, I'm not aware of other studies that have been done on the potential for it, but I will say that geoengineering is again a very contentious topic. And carbon capture and storage is just one form of geoengineering, but basically geoengineering says that we should try to manipulate our environment and weather and clouds and atmospheric systems so as to reduce the impacts of climate change. But wouldn't it just be much easier to put that money and effort to reducing our emissions in the first place? Because science is already saying that if you reduce your carbon emissions rapidly, climate change is reversible. It's not a completely lost cause. It's not a completely irreversible problem. So geoengineering is simply preparing for the worst. It's like preparing for, what kind of analogy can I use? You are at risk of heart attack. You haven't had the heart attack yet. So you could just improve your lifestyle, but instead you choose to put on those clamps and give your heart a shock to revive it before you've actually had the heart attack. So geoengineering is completely unnecessary and expensive, and there's a lot of uncertainty associated with it. Whereas you could simply just try to put that effort to reduce your emissions now and decarbonize your economy. So that's my point of view on that. There's another question on the relationship between NFTs and carbon footprints. Are there any bodies that determine the limits for their working in environmental sphere and the carbon emissions they are responsible for? This is not an issue I have looked into at all, so I would not be able to comment on this. Mr. Shejo George has said, can we at least work at a micro level of taking a green pledge as individuals to be more responsible citizens? Reduce plastics, reduce reuse, of course, that's a wonderful call to action. Shirley ma'am, any further comments?
Shall I ask you a question?
Yes, please go ahead. Please go ahead.
One more question, ma'am. Permit them for one more question, then we can.
Sure. So we can make this the last question, and yeah, please go ahead, ma'am.
It was a nice presentation, really informative. And in line with the last comment which came just now, do you think we really make our people aware of the consequences of their actions day by day, like the interventions that we want to make at the micro level? Are we really aware of this? We have seen the catastrophes which were predicted to be happening only in 100 years, in less than 10 years. So are we really ready for it? Are we taking the common man into confidence and leading them to combat against these climate change, global warming, and all those?
I think we are in a much better place than we were, let's say, a decade ago, or even maybe 5 years ago. Today, for example, every time an IPCC report or a UN environmental report is published, you are actually seeing media coverage of it. You are seeing lay people, people who are unrelated to the climate change space talking about it. And I think that itself is a great sign of the increasing awareness of the problem. In the education sphere, more and more, of course, colleges like yourself, but more and more institutions are not only having lectures, courses, and discussions on climate change, but they're incorporating more climate studies into their curriculum itself. So that's another step in the absolutely right direction. But climate literacy continues to be an ongoing process. And particularly, I think where it's needed is at the grassroots level, particularly for people who are working in sectors like agriculture, which are extremely vulnerable to climate change, extremely at risk. Food production, crop yields are expected to be impacted very badly by extreme weather events. So I think for sectors like that, greater climate literacy is urgently required. And there is a big need for climate literacy in regional languages, I personally believe. Unless all of this climate change education is made available in languages accessible across different regions, across different countries, it's going to continue to be the stronghold of just, our type of policy analysts who speak English, and that's not good enough. It has to percolate to every section of society and be translated into all of the thousands of languages that we have to make it truly accessible. And I think that's something that civil society and educators have not made great progress on. So I think that remains something that needs to be done much more.
Shirley madam, അടുത്ത ദിവ്യ ഡോക്ടർ ദിവ്യയോട് പറഞ്ഞിട്ട് അടുത്ത വോട്ടർ സയൻസിലേക്ക് കടക്കരുതോ ഇനി?
Okay, sir.
Thank you, participants, for those interesting questions, and thank you, Avantika ma'am, for the response. Thank you very much. I now invite Dr. Ranjit Matthew Abraham, Vice Principal of the College and Member Academic Committee, to give a vote of thanks. Over to you, Ranjit sir.
Divya, am I audible?
Yes, sir, you are. Yes.
Okay, thank you. For the past 2 hours, we have been listening to a very wonderful, brilliant academic talk by Srimati Avanti Goswami of the Center for Science and Environment. I think she made a very lucid and clear presentation of the climate crisis, which is having an impact on almost every living thing on this universe. I think in her presentation, she touched upon the causes for climate change, the impact, the historical developments with relation to climate change, the chronology of agreements made with relation to the climatic crisis, nationally determined contributions. And then I think she also touched upon the COP26 Glasgow Agreement and all the main issues concerning the Glasgow Agreement. Madam, on behalf of the Alumni Association of Bishop Moore College and on behalf of all the organizers, We are extremely grateful to you for spending so much of time with us, for taking up all the questions that came up from the audience. Ma'am, we are immensely thankful to you for your brilliant presentation. Thank you, madam.
Thank you very much, and thank you for inviting me, and looking forward to staying in touch with your community. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I would like to express our gratitude to the chairman of the Alumni Association, Mr. K.G. Mugundan, who was chairing this session. K.G. Mugundan, sir, on behalf of Bishop Moore College, on behalf of the Alumni Association, we are extremely grateful and for your presence and for chairing this session. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
I express a word of thanks to the secretary, Mr. Joseph, for taking the pains to organize this program. I think this program was really beneficial to our students and to the college community. Thank you so much, sir. I also express our gratitude to the keynote address by Srimati Sheila Thomas. I think she was very kind enough to spend her valuable time with us and for giving us her keynote address. Ma'am, on behalf of the Alumni Association, we express a sincere gratitude to you. On this occasion, I also thank our principal, Dr. Jacob Chandy sir, for giving for addressing this meeting. In his absence, I thank Dr. Jacob Chandy sir for his address. I also thank the Dr. Divya S, who was comparing this program. Ma'am, on behalf of the Alumni Association, we express a sincere gratitude to you. I also express a sincere gratitude to Lynette Joseph, who has been consistently, who was working with the technology and organizing this program. I express a sincere gratitude to Lynette Joseph for overlooking the technological aspects. The main person behind this program was Dr. Shirley P. Anand. I think she was the academic committee convener. I think she took a lot of pains in organizing this program. She applied all her mind in all the minute specifics in organizing this program. Ma'am, on behalf of the Alumni Association and on behalf of Bishop Moore College, we express a sincere gratitude to Dr. Shirley P. Anand. Thank you so much, madam. I also express a sincere gratitude to all the office bearers of the Alumni Association and to all the alumni members, teachers, former teachers. We have VC John sir and many eminent principals, vice principals and eminent professors, very eminent alumni members. And I also like to thank the alumni members for their very vibrant interaction during the session. Once again, I thank all the members of the Alumni Association for organizing such a wonderful program, which was so very beneficial to all our students. I thank all the organizers. Thank you. Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, sir. And we have come to the end of the program. Thank you very much, all of